She never meant to scratch his car, but there she stood, frozen beneath Tokyo's neon glow, rain soaking through her clothes as she stared at the ugly mark her bracelet had left on the Maybach's perfect finish. When the bodyguards appeared, she knew she was facing more than an expensive repair bill. The man they protected wasn't just wealthy, he was Ryuichi Hanazawa. Everyone in Tokyo knew what happened to people who crossed him, so when he stepped forward, studying her with amber eyes that missed nothing, she expected violence. Instead, he smiled and extended his hand. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of fate's unexpected turns, please consider subscribing for more. Rain pelted the neon-washed streets of Ginza, transforming Tokyo's most luxurious shopping district into a blur of reflected light. Azumi Kageyama hunched her shoulders against the downpour, cursing the timing. Her thin jacket provided little protection, but her concern wasn't for herself. It was for the carefully wrapped package she shielded beneath it. The ceramic piece had taken her weeks to perfect, its delicate glaze capturing the ephemeral beauty of cherry blossoms against midnight blue. It represented her last hope after the prestigious Tanaka Gallery had rejected her portfolio. This smaller gallery might be less renowned, but their acceptance would mean she could finally reduce her soul-crushing shifts at Shimizu, the high-end restaurant where she'd spent the evening being berated by the manager for breaking an imported plate. "Clumsy hands don't belong in fine establishments," he'd sneered, making her bow repeatedly before the customers. The memory burned as she navigated the rain-slicked sidewalk. She wasn't clumsy. Her hands created beauty from raw earth. They transformed clay into art that should be valued, not dismissed. A gust of wind drove the rain sideways, and Azumi ducked between two parked luxury cars, seeking momentary shelter. Her foot slipped on the wet pavement, sending her lurching forward. Her precious package slipped from her grasp, and instinct took over. She lunged to catch it, her metal bracelet, the only gift her grandmother had left her, scraping against the gleaming black finish of the vehicle beside her. The sound was unmistakable, metal against metal, leaving a visible gash across the flawless door of what she now recognized as a Maybach, a car worth more than she'd earned in 5 years. Azumi froze, her package clutched safely against her chest, water dripping from her hair as she stared at the damage. The scratch gleamed accusingly under the streetlights, a jagged line marring perfection. "Oh God," she whispered. She couldn't afford this. Not financially, not today, not ever. The lights of the car flashed as someone disengaged the security system. Azumi's heart hammered against her ribs. She should run, disappear into the rainy night, but her feet remained rooted to the spot, as if the guilt itself had become an anchor. 2 men appeared first, emerging from the high-end sushi restaurant nearby. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing impeccable black suits despite the rain. Their posture and watchful eyes marked them instantly as bodyguards. They spotted her immediately standing by the car, and their expressions hardened. One touched his earpiece, speaking in low tones, while the other moved toward her with purposeful strides. Azumi clutched her ceramic piece tighter, as if it might shield her from whatever was coming. Then a third man appeared, and the bodyguards parted for him with practiced deference. He moved differently, confident, unhurried, owning the space around him. Raindrops seemed to hesitate before landing on his tailored charcoal suit. He was striking rather than conventionally handsome, with sharp cheekbones and unusual amber eyes that assessed everything with calm intensity. His dark hair was immaculately styled, with a single silver streak at the temple, despite appearing to be in his late 30s. The man's gaze shifted from Azumi to the scratch on his car, then back to her with unreadable precision. One of the bodyguards leaned in, whispering something, and Azumi caught a glimpse of a tattoo peeking from beneath his collar, intricate scales in dark ink. "Sir, she damaged the car." "We'll handle it," the bodyguard said, loud enough for Azumi to hear. The man raised his hand slightly, and the bodyguard fell silent immediately. The simple gesture contained such authority that Azumi felt a chill unrelated to the rain seeping through her clothes. "Do you know what you've done?" the man asked. His voice was surprisingly soft, almost gentle, though it carried clearly through the rainfall. "I'm so sorry," Azumi managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was an accident. I slipped and my bracelet. I can pay for repairs." The lie tasted bitter. She could barely make rent this month. Instead of responding to her apology, the man's focus shifted to her hands, where she still protectively clutched her wrapped ceramic piece. "What are you protecting more carefully than your own safety?" he asked, genuine curiosity coloring his tone. Azumi hesitated, then slightly loosened her grip on the package. "My work. I'm a ceramicist." Something changed in the man's expression, a flicker of interest that transformed his face. He stepped closer, seemingly oblivious to the rain now dampening his expensive suit. "May I see it?" he asked. The request was so unexpected that Azumi found herself unwrapping the waterproof covering before she could think better of it. She revealed the tea bowl, its midnight blue glaze shimmering with embedded cherry blossoms that appeared to float on the surface. The man studied it with surprising intensity, then extended his hand, not toward the piece, but to her. "I'm Ryuichi Hanazawa, and you are?" The name triggered recognition. Hanazawa. The Hanazawa family owned half the legitimate businesses in this district, and according to whispers, most of the illegitimate ones as well. The realization of whose car she'd damaged made her blood run cold. "Azumi Kageyama," she answered, her voice steadier than she expected. "Kageyama-san," he said, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "Would you join me for a conversation about your work, and perhaps about my car as well?" It wasn't really a question, despite his polite phrasing. One bodyguard already held an umbrella over Ryuichi, while the other waited expectantly to escort her. The rain continued to pour, and Azumi realized she had no real choice. She nodded once, and Ryuichi's lips curved into what might have been a smile. "Excellent," he said. "I find that tea helps most conversations, particularly on rainy nights." 10 minutes later, Azumi found herself seated across from Ryuichi Hanazawa in a private room at the back of the sushi restaurant she'd passed earlier. The space had clearly been vacated for them, despite the restaurant being otherwise full. One bodyguard stood by the door, the other outside. A single waitress had brought them tea and then disappeared. Azumi's ceramic piece sat between them on the polished table, unwrapped fully now. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted the tea Ryuichi offered. "This is Koshu Ajed Gyokuro," he said, noting her hesitation. "Quite rare, from Uji. The leaves are aged for 3 years before processing." The teacup alone looked museum quality, delicate porcelain with hand-painted details. Azumi recognized the maker's mark, a renowned artist whose pieces sold for thousands. She took a cautious sip, the tea's complex flavor momentarily distracting her from her predicament. "You have an artist's appreciation," Ryuichi observed, watching her reaction to the tea. "Now, about your work." He gestured to her ceramic bowl. "This is exceptional craftsmanship. The way you've suspended the cherry blossoms in the glaze, there's a technique there I haven't seen often." Azumi blinked in surprise. "You know ceramics?" "I know beauty," he replied simply. "And I recognize the influence of the Momoyama period in your work, particularly the hand of Takashi Himura." The reference to her greatest inspiration, a master potter who had disappeared from the art world years ago, caught her off guard. "How do you—" "My family has collected Japanese ceramics for generations," Ryuichi said, his fingers tracing the rim of his teacup, "before we were known for other ventures." The subtle reference to his family's Yakuza connections hung in the air between them. Azumi straightened her spine, gathering her courage. "About your car," she began. "I truly am sorry. I can't afford to repair it immediately, but I could arrange payments." Ryuichi waved his hand dismissively. "The Maybach was a gift from my father before he passed. Its value isn't primarily financial." The statement only increased Azumi's dismay. "I'm even more sorry then." A phone rang, and Ryuichi extracted a sleek device from his pocket. His expression changed subtly as he checked the screen. "Excuse me," he said, rising and moving a few steps away. Though he spoke quietly, fragments reached her. "The Northern Territories are non-negotiable. No ample warning was given. If they wish to test boundaries, they should remember what happened at Shibuya last year." When he turned back toward her, his face had hardened, revealing a glimpse of something cold and calculating beneath the cultured exterior. Azumi felt a chill of fear. This man wasn't just wealthy. He was powerful in ways that existed outside the law. As he returned to the table, his sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing more of the intricate dragon tattoo she'd glimpsed earlier. Traditional Irizumi, the mark of Yakuza, though rarely displayed so publicly anymore. "Forgive the interruption," he said, his voice returning to its earlier measured calm. "Business never truly rests." He reached for her ceramic piece again, turning it in his hands with surprising gentleness. "You were bringing this to a gallery? How did you know? The careful packaging, the hour, the direction you were walking?" He set the bowl down. "Which gallery?" "Matsuhara. It's small, but I know it. They won't appreciate this properly." His statement wasn't arrogant, just matter of fact. "They'll display it alongside mass-produced pieces and tourist trinkets." Azumi couldn't deny it. Desperation had lowered her standards. Ryoichi studied her for a moment, then seemed to reach a decision. "I have a proposition for you, Kageyama-san. A way to resolve the matter of my car while benefiting us both." "I'm listening," she said cautiously. "I would like to commission you to create something specific, a ceremonial tea set with particular requirements." He retrieved his phone again, scrolling through until he found an image, then turned it toward her. Azumi's breath caught. On the screen was a historical piece she recognized immediately. A legendary tea set created by Master Takashi Himura 50 years ago, rumored to have been destroyed in a museum fire. "A reproduction?" she asked. "A reinterpretation," Ryoichi corrected. "Honoring the original, but with your distinctive touch. Complete this commission to my satisfaction, and we'll consider your debt for the car paid in full." The offer seemed too generous. A commission like this would typically command a substantial fee, far more than the repair costs for even a luxury vehicle. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. Ryoichi's lips curved slightly. "Direct. I appreciate that." He set down his teacup. "The catch, as you put it, is that you would need to work from my private studio. The project requires specific materials and, more importantly, privacy." "You want me to work where you live?" Azumi clarified, alarm bells ringing. "I have a fully equipped ceramic studio that sits mostly unused. You would have access to materials most artists only dream of. And yes, security considerations require the work be done on my premises." Before she could respond, the door slid open and the bodyguard leaned in. "Sir, the car is ready." Ryoichi nodded. "Consider my offer, Kageyama-san. Though I should mention that time is a factor." He produced a business card, placing it beside her tea bowl. "Call this number with your answer by tomorrow noon." As he escorted her outside, a sleek black sedan had replaced the scratched Maybach. Rain had slowed to a gentle patter. "I'll have my driver take you wherever you're going," Ryoichi said. "That's not necessary," Azumi protested. "Your work will get wet," he countered reasonably, gesturing to her ceramic piece. "And it's quite late now." The concern seemed genuine, which only confused Azumi more. She found herself in the back seat of the luxury sedan, giving her address to the driver as Ryoichi closed her door with a small bow. Through the window, their eyes met once more. "Until tomorrow, Kageyama-san," he said, the statement carrying the weight of certainty that she would accept his offer. As the car pulled away, Azumi clutched her ceramic piece and wondered what choice she truly had. The business card in her pocket felt inexplicably heavy. Morning light filtered through Azumi's small apartment window, illuminating the sparse furnishings and the ceramic workspace she'd created in what should have been a dining area. Her fingers traced Ryoichi Hanazawa's business card for the 20th time, the embossed dragon logo catching the light. She'd barely slept, weighing her options. The practical side of her recognized the opportunity: access to premium materials, a prestigious commission, and wiping away a debt she couldn't afford to pay. The cautious side remembered the cold calculation in Ryoichi's eyes during that phone call, the deference of his men, the subtle but unmistakable power he wielded. Her phone rang, startling her. The gallery. "Kageyama-san," the curator's voice was apologetic but firm. "We've reviewed your submission again, but I'm afraid it's still not quite what we're looking for this season. Perhaps next year?" Azumi thanked him mechanically and ended the call. Another rejection? Her bank account showed less than a week's rent remaining, and the restaurant manager had cut her hours after last night's incident. Decision made, she dialed the number on Ryoichi's card. A woman answered immediately. "Hanazawa office." "This is Azumi Kageyama for Hanazawa-san." "Of course, Kageyama-san. A car will collect you in 30 minutes. The line went dead before Azumi could respond. 30 minutes to pack what she needed: clay tools, personal items, a change of clothes. Apparently, her acceptance had been anticipated. The black sedan arrived precisely on time. The driver, different from last night's, helped load her supplies and drove in silence through Tokyo's bustling streets. They headed toward Roppongi Hills, where glass towers house the city's elite. But instead of stopping at one of the luxury high-rises, they continued past, turning onto a secluded road that wound upward. They arrived at a traditional gate set into a high stone wall, incongruous among the modern architecture surrounding it. Security cameras tracked their arrival, and the massive wooden doors swung open automatically. Behind the walls lay an unexpected oasis. Traditional Japanese gardens surrounded a complex that blended centuries-old architecture with modern elements. A sprawling residence that seemed transplanted from another era, yet with gleaming glass extensions that caught the morning light. The car stopped before the main entrance, where a woman in a tailored suit waited. "Kageyama-san, welcome. I'm Miyu, Mr. Hanazawa's assistant. Please follow me." Azumi was led through corridors that transitioned from modern minimalism to traditional Japanese aesthetics. Staff members bowed respectfully as they passed. Security personnel stood at key points, their suits unable to fully conceal shoulder holsters. "Mr. Hanazawa is concluding a business meeting," Miyu explained as they climbed a glass staircase to the building's upper level. "He asked me to show you to the studio." The studio took Azumi's breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden, flooding the space with natural light. Every tool a ceramicist could desire was arranged with precision: wheels, kilns, glazing stations, and materials of the highest quality. A separate area held reference books and historical pottery displayed in illuminated cases. "This is incredible," Azumi managed, running her fingers along a wheel that cost more than her annual rent. "Mr. Hanazawa believed you would appreciate it," Miyu said. "Your living quarters are through there. The staff will bring your meals. If you require anything else, use this." She handed Azumi a tablet. "Mr. Hanazawa will join you this afternoon to discuss the commission details." Left alone, Azumi explored the space that would be her workplace and home for the foreseeable future. The living quarters were small but luxurious, a bedroom, bathroom, and sitting area with the same spectacular view. She unpacked her tools, familiarizing herself with the studio layout. Despite the opulence, something felt off. She tried the door Miyu had exited through. Locked. The tablet showed various service options, but no communication capabilities. The windows, while beautiful, didn't open. She was in a gilded cage. Hours later, the door slid open, and Ryuichi entered. He'd exchanged yesterday's formal suit for more casual attire. Dark trousers, and a simple button-down shirt that did nothing to diminish his authority. "Has everything been provided to your satisfaction?" he asked, surveying the space. "The studio is exceptional," Azumi admitted, "though I didn't realize I would be locked in." Ryuichi's expression didn't change. "A security precaution. Not to keep you in, but to keep others out. My home contains many valuable items, and not everyone who visits has honorable intentions." Before she could question this explanation, raised voices echoed from somewhere below, followed by what sounded disturbingly like breaking glass. Ryuichi's posture changed instantly, alert and dangerous. "Excuse me," he said calmly, though his eyes had hardened. He pressed something on his watch, and within seconds, one of his bodyguards appeared. "Sir, the Ishida representatives are becoming insistent." "I see. Please ensure Ms. Kageyama remains undisturbed. I'll handle this personally." The door closed behind them, but not before Azumi heard Ryuichi's voice drop to a tone that made her shiver. "Remind them whose territory they're standing in, and the consequences of disrespect." Alone again, Azumi moved to the window overlooking the courtyard below. 4 men were being escorted, or rather, forced, toward the gate by Ryuichi's security team. Ryuichi himself stood watching, his posture relaxed but radiating authority. When one man turned back, shouting something and reaching inside his jacket, Ryuichi made a small gesture. One of the bodyguards moved with shocking speed, and the protesting man was suddenly kneeling, arm bent at an unnatural angle. Words were exchanged. The man nodded repeatedly, face contorted in pain. Only then did Ryuichi approach, leaning down to speak directly into the man's ear. Whatever he said caused all color to drain from the man's face. Azumi stepped back from the window, her heart racing. The refined art collector who had admired her work had momentarily vanished, replaced by someone who commanded fear with casual efficiency. When Ryuichi returned an hour later, he carried a wooden case as if the courtyard incident had never happened. My apologies for the interruption. Business disagreements occasionally become heated. He set the case on a table and opened it, revealing aged documents and photographs. These are the specifications for the tea set I'd like you to create. Azumi approached cautiously, professional curiosity overcoming her unease. The documents detailed a ceremonial tea set, originally created by Takashi Himura in 1972, the same one Ryuichi had shown her on his phone. This set was commissioned by my grandfather for a specific tea ceremony, Ryuichi explained, his passion for the subject evident. It incorporated techniques that haven't been widely replicated since. The museum fire in 1987, Azumi murmured, examining the photographs. It was believed nothing survived. Very little did, Ryuichi confirmed, something like grief flickering across his features. These references are all that remain. Azumi studied the images with growing appreciation. The glaze work was exceptional, with depth she'd only seen in historical masterpieces. Why me? She asked finally. There are more established ceramicists who could attempt this. Recreation. Ryuichi's amber eyes fixed on her with unsettling intensity. Because your work shows the same soul as the original, the same understanding of balance between tradition and innovation. He paused. And because I believe Takashi Himura would approve of you as his successor. The statement seemed oddly personal. Before Azumi could question it further, Ryuichi continued. You'll have everything you need. I only ask for updates on your progress and privacy regarding the project. How long do I have? Quality supersedes speed, he said, though I would hope for completion within 3 weeks. Azumi nodded slowly. I'll need to create test pieces first, to perfect the glaze formula. Of course. Ryuichi moved toward the door. I'll leave you to familiarize yourself with the references. Dinner will be brought at 7. At the threshold, he paused, turning back. Kageyama-san, I understand this arrangement may seem unusual, but I assure you, what you create here matters more than you yet understand. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and the unmistakable sound of a lock engaging. Days melted into one another as Azumi lost herself in the work. The studio became her universe, its perfect light and exceptional tools, extensions of her own hands. She had never experienced such focus, such freedom to create without worrying about rent or rejection letters. Each morning she woke before dawn, eager to test new glaze combinations, to feel clay taking shape beneath her fingertips. The ceremonial tea set was unlike anything she had attempted before, 5 pieces of increasing complexity. The teapot formed the centerpiece, its design incorporating elements of both wabi-sabi simplicity and technical virtuosity that challenged even her trained hands. The reference photos revealed subtle details that most observers would miss, but that Azumi recognized as marks of mastery. Ryuichi visited daily, usually in the late afternoon. Their conversations evolved from formal progress reports to genuine artistic discussions. He possessed knowledge of ceramic history that surprised her, speaking of obscure techniques and forgotten masters with intimate familiarity. The Nashiji glaze you're developing, he commented on the 4th day, examining her test pieces. It captures the gold flecks exactly as in Himura's original. Almost, Azumi corrected, pointing to microscopic differences. His had a depth I haven't quite achieved yet. Ryuichi's lips curved slightly. Few would notice the difference. I would, she said simply. He studied her then, with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. Yes, he finally said. That's why you're here. By the end of the first week, Azumi had completed preliminary versions of 3 pieces. The teapot still eluded her perfection. Though she remained technically a captive, the staff treated her with unusual deference. Her meals arrived on exquisite ceramics from different historical periods, AWSTC, silent education in itself. The tablet provided any reference material she requested, though external communication remained blocked. One evening, after Ryuichi had examined her day's work with approval, he hesitated before leaving. Would you like to see more of the compound? He asked unexpectedly. You've been confined to this space for days. Surprised by the offer, Azumi nodded. I would appreciate that. He gestured for her to follow, leading her down corridors she hadn't yet seen. Unlike her previous escort, he moved unhurriedly, pausing to explain various art pieces they passed. A folding screen from the Edo period, contemporary sculptures, and, most strikingly, display cases containing ceramics spanning centuries. Your family's collection? Azumi asked, marveling at a rare Momoyama period tea bowl. Part of it, Ryuichi acknowledged. My grandfather began collecting seriously after the war. My father continued, though his interests were more diverse. They passed staff members who bowed deeply to Ryuichi, their eyes carefully averted. Twice they encountered men with the unmistakable bearing of security personnel, who spoke briefly to Ryuichi in hushed tones. The gardens proved even more impressive up close. Stone paths wound among carefully tended maple trees, and a koi pond, where orange and white fish scattered at their approach. A traditional tea house stood on a small island in the center of the pond, accessible by an arched wooden bridge. This feels separate from Tokyo, Azumi observed, like stepping back in time. That was the intention, Ryuichi said. My grandfather insisted on preserving this space even as glass towers rose around us. He believed certain traditions should remain untouched by modernization. As they crossed the bridge toward the tea house, Azumi noticed how the security personnel maintained a respectful distance while never losing sight of them. Am I still a prisoner here? She asked directly, stopping midway across the bridge. Ryuichi turned to face her, amber eyes reflecting the setting sun. You were never a prisoner, Kageyama-san. You are a guest with restrictions. Is there a difference? Intent, he answered without hesitation. A prisoner is kept for punishment. You are protected for a purpose. Protected from what? Rather than answer, Ryuichi gestured toward the tea house. Some questions are better discussed over tea. The interior of the tea house was traditional in every detail. Tatami mats, a sunken hearth, an alcove displaying a scroll painting of mountains enshrouded in mist. With practiced movements, Ryuichi prepared tea himself rather than summoning staff. Most visitors expect me to have servants perform the tea ceremony, he commented, heating water in an iron kettle. They miss that the preparation is central to the experience. Azumi watched his hands, strong and sure, yet performing the delicate movements with surprising grace. You were trained properly. By my grandfather, he confirmed, before other lessons took precedence. The cryptic comment hung between them as he whisked the matcha to a perfect froth and presented it with a formal bow. Azumi accepted the bowl, turning it properly in her hands before drinking. The tea was exceptional, the bowl a museum-quality piece by a living national treasure. You asked about protection, Ryuichi said, after they had both drunk. The Hanazawa family has enemies, some for business reasons, others because of what we preserve. Art? Azumi asked skeptically. Legacy, he corrected, which includes art, but extends beyond it. The tea set you're recreating is not merely valuable ceramic. It represents something certain factions would prefer remain destroyed. You're being deliberately vague, Azumi noted. The corner of Ryuichi's mouth lifted slightly. Yes, but I will tell you this. What you are creating will complete something that was violently interrupted decades ago. Your hands are finishing what was started by a master. Despite her frustration at his evasiveness, Azumi felt a chill of recognition. The tea set design contained elements that resonated deeply with her own artistic instincts, as if she were remembering rather than learning the techniques. There's more to this commission than repaying a car scratch, she said. There was never really a debt for the car, Ryuichi admitted. That scratch was convenient. Before Azumi could demand clarification, a soft electronic tone sounded. Ryuichi removed a phone from his pocket, his expression hardening as he read the screen. We need to return, he said, all warmth vanishing from his voice. Now! He led her back across the garden at a much faster pace, his hand occasionally touching her elbow to guide her. Security personnel fell into formation around them. Through windows, Azumi glimpsed increased activity inside the compound. What's happening? She asked. Business, Ryuichi replied tersely. When they reached the main building, he turned to her. Please return to your studio. Do not leave it until I come for you, regardless of what you might hear. The warning sent a spike of fear through her. Ryuichi-san, I'm not comfortable being locked in if there's danger. His expression softened momentarily. The studio is the safest room in the compound. Its security systems exceed those of bank vaults. He hesitated, then added more gently, "Trust me in this, if nothing else." Before she could respond, Miyu appeared with two security guards. "Please escort Kageyama-san to her studio," Ryuichi instructed. "Implement Protocol 3. Miyu's expression revealed nothing, but Azumi noticed her hand move subtly toward what might have been a concealed weapon. "Understood, sir." As they led her away, Azumi glanced back to see Ryuichi conferring with a group of men whose body language spoke of imminent conflict. Back in her studio, Azumi heard the locks engage with multiple electronic confirmations. Miyu checked the windows and perimeter before departing with a respectful bow, but no explanation. Left alone, Azumi tried to focus on her work, but concentration proved impossible. From somewhere in the compound, she heard raised voices, then what might have been breaking glass. Security lights activated in the garden below, illuminating the grounds with harsh brightness. An hour passed in tense silence before the locks disengaged. Ryuichi entered, his pristine appearance from earlier replaced by disheveled hair and a torn shirt sleeve. A thin cut marked his cheekbone, blood dried but not cleaned away. "Are you all right?" Azumi asked, moving toward him instinctively. He seemed surprised by her concern. "I'm fine. A disagreement with business associates that became physical. Those associates wouldn't be the same ones who want the tea set to remain destroyed, would they?" Ryuichi studied her for a moment, then sighed. "You're perceptive. Yes, they are connected." He moved to the window, looking out at the illuminated garden. "The Ishida family once partnered with mine. The partnership ended, badly. They believe certain traditions died with that partnership. And this tea set represents those traditions? In part." He turned back to her. "Your safety was never at risk. My security team is extremely thorough." Azumi crossed her arms. "I think I deserve the complete truth. Why am I really here? What am I actually creating?" Ryuichi's amber eyes held hers for a long moment. "You're right," he finally said. "But the truth is not solely mine to share. Tomorrow, when you complete the base pieces, I will show you." That night, sleep eluded Azumi. She worked instead, losing herself in the creation of the teapot that had resisted her mastery. As dawn broke, she finally achieved the form she sought. A perfect balance between structured elegance and natural flow, the handle curved like a brushstroke, the spout precise yet seemingly organic. When Ryuichi arrived that afternoon, he stopped in the doorway, his eyes fixed on the completed set arranged on her workbench, 5 pieces gleaming in the afternoon light, their surfaces capturing and transforming the sunlight into depth that seemed to extend beyond physical possibility. "You've finished," he said, his voice unusually soft. "This morning," Azumi confirmed. "They need final firing, but the forms are complete." Ryuichi approached slowly, as if reluctant to break a spell. His fingers hovered over each piece without touching, tracing their contours in the air. When he reached the teapot, his hand trembled slightly. "It's perfect," he whispered, and Azumi was startled to see moisture in his eyes. He collected himself quickly. "The firing should happen tonight. Will you prepare them?" Azumi nodded, sensing the importance of the moment. "They'll be ready by morning." "Good." Ryuichi straightened his shoulders. "Tomorrow at noon, we will hold a tea ceremony. There is someone who has waited a very long time to see these pieces completed." True to his word, the following day Ryuichi arrived precisely at noon. He brought with him a kimono for Azumi, indigo silk with subtle silver threading, clearly antique but in perfect condition. "This belonged to my grandmother," he explained. "It seems fitting for today." Miyu helped Azumi dress, expertly tying the obi and arranging her hair with traditional combs. When complete, the transformation was startling, the simple potter replaced by someone who might have stepped from a historical painting. "Ryuichi-san is waiting in the eastern garden," Miyu said, leading Azumi through corridors she hadn't yet seen. They passed deeper into the compound, beyond the modern sections, into areas that preserved traditional architecture completely. The floors beneath Azumi's feet were nightingale floors, designed to sing warning when walked upon, an ancient security system still functioning. The eastern garden proved smaller and more intimate than the main garden, enclosed by high stone walls covered in moss. A traditional building stood at its center, more temple than tea house. Ryoichi waited at its entrance, dressed in formal kimono that transformed him as completely as Azumi's had changed her. The severity of the black silk emphasized his natural authority, the family crest embroidered at shoulder and back. "You look appropriate to the occasion," he said simply, his eyes lingering on her transformed appearance. "What occasion exactly?" Azumi asked. Rather than answer, Ryoichi slid open the door and gestured for her to enter. The room beyond was arranged for tea ceremony, with a sunken hearth and tatami mats. The newly created tea set waited on a lacquered tray, each piece positioned precisely. What Azumi hadn't expected was the elderly man seated on a cushion opposite the entrance. He was thin to the point of fragility, his spine curved with age, seated in the formal seiza position, despite what must have been considerable discomfort. His hands, spotted with age, rested motionless on his knees. When he raised his face to look at her, Azumi felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Even aged, those eyes were unmistakable, the same unusual amber as Ryoichi's, set in a face she had seen in ceramic history books and museum catalogs. "Takashi Himura," she whispered, the old man's face creased in a smile. "You recognize an old potter, even when time has changed him so much? I am honored, Kageyama-san." Azumi turned to Ryoichi in confusion. "But he died in the museum fire. Everyone knows that." "Everyone was meant to believe that," Ryoichi corrected gently. "Please, sit. My grandfather has waited many years for this moment." Grandfather? The relationship explained so much. Ryoichi's knowledge, his connection to ceramics, the family's collection. Still stunned, Azumi took her place opposite Takashi Himura, the living legend whose techniques had influenced her work since her earliest training. "You are surprised to find me alive," Takashi said, his voice thin but clear. "The fire that destroyed my work was not accident but intentional destruction. Those who arranged it believed I perished as well. My family thought it safer to maintain that belief. My father moved grandfather here secretly," Ryoichi explained, kneeling beside them. "The compound has sheltered him for 38 years. Takashi nodded slowly. "I watched the art world from seclusion. Occasionally I created pieces under different names, and I watched for someone who might understand what was lost in that fire." His amber eyes fixed on Azumi with surprising intensity. "Someone with hands that could recreate what was destroyed." "But why me?" Azumi asked. "There are many talented ceramicists." "None who captured the essence rather than merely the technique," Takashi responded. "I recognized your spirit in your work when Ryoichi first showed me your pieces. The car incident merely provided an opportunity to bring you here." Azumi glanced at Ryoichi. "You scratched your own car?" A hint of amusement touched his lips. "A small price. Though I did not anticipate you would use that particular street on that specific rainy night. Fortune sometimes favors the patient." "What was destroyed in the fire?" Azumi asked, returning to the central mystery. "Why was it so important that these pieces be recreated?" Takashi and Ryoichi exchanged glances. The old man nodded once, granting permission. "The tea set was created for a specific ceremony," Ryoichi explained. "A ritual that formally recognized the alliance between 5 families who had protected Japanese artistic traditions through war and occupation. The ceremony was interrupted by those who saw our alliance as a threat to their power. The destruction of the tea set became symbolic of their attempt to erase our legacy. 4 of the 5 families have maintained the alliance in secret," Takashi continued. "The 5th, the Ishida family, betrayed the others, aligning with those who sought to control rather than preserve." The pieces began to fall into place for Azumi. "And recreating this tea set is about restoring the original alliance?" "Completing what was violently interrupted," Ryoichi confirmed. "The ceremony never finished. The pieces were destroyed. My grandfather was believed dead. The alliance fractured." He looked at the tea set gleaming on the lacquered tray. "Until now." Takashi leaned forward, his aged hands hovering over the pieces Azumi had created. "May I?" he asked, a master seeking permission from an artist. "Of course," Azumi said, humbled by his respect. With reverent movements, Takashi lifted each piece, examining it from every angle. When he came to the teapot, his hands trembled visibly. "You understand," he whispered, "not just the form, but the intention, the spirit within the clay." He looked up at Azumi, tears gathering in his amber eyes. These are not merely recreations, they are completions. The old master turned to his grandson. She must know the full truth before the ceremony. She has earned that right. Ryuichi nodded once, his expression solemn. Kageyama-san, what my grandfather means to say is that your work bears his influence for a reason more profound than study or coincidence. Takashi placed the teapot carefully back on the tray. Your grandmother was Michiko Kageyama? Azumi's breath caught. Yes. She raised me after my parents died. She was the one who taught me ceramics. Michiko was my most gifted student, Takashi said, his voice warm with memory. Before the fire, before I went into hiding, she carried forward techniques I thought lost. She never mentioned studying with you, Azumi said, confused. To protect both you and herself, Ryuichi explained. The Ishida family has been systematic in eliminating connections to the original alliance. Anyone known to have trained under my grandfather was at risk. Your grandmother protected you by keeping silent, Takashi added, but she taught you everything, every technique, every understanding of clay and glaze. She made you my legacy without ever speaking my name. Azumi remembered her grandmother's hands guiding hers, the specific way she had taught her to feel the clay's resistance, to understand glaze chemistry as interaction rather than formula. Memories resurfaced. Her grandmother's collection of ceramic books with certain pages studied more than others, all featuring Takashi's work. The bracelet, Azumi said suddenly, touching her wrist where the metal bracelet had scratched Ryuichi's car. She gave it to me. When I completed my first successful firing, she said it belonged to her teacher. Takashi's eyes widened. You still have it? After all these years? Azumi nodded. I never take it off. The old master closed his eyes briefly, emotion crossing his weathered features. That bracelet was my gift to her when she completed her mastery, a circle connecting teacher to student. He opened his eyes, gazing at Ryuichi and then Azumi. And now the circle completes again. Ryuichi rose smoothly to his feet. Tomorrow, representatives from the 4 allied families will gather here. For the first time in nearly 4 decades, the ceremony will be completed using the tea set you have created. The alliance will be formally restored. His amber eyes held Azumi's. With your permission, as the creator of the pieces. The Ishida family will not allow this easily, Takashi warned. They have already made one attempt to interrupt the completion. The incident the other night, Azumi realized. Ryuichi nodded. They suspect something but lack confirmation. Security has been increased accordingly. What happens after the ceremony? Azumi asked. Do I simply return to my life as if none of this happened? That, Ryuichi said quietly, will be entirely your choice. That evening, Azumi sat alone in her studio, watching. Darkness fall over the garden. The completed tea set had been moved to a secure location in preparation for the ceremony. Her hands felt strangely empty without clay to shape, her mind too full of revelations to focus on creating anything new. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. The door opened to reveal Ryuichi, changed from formal kimono back to his usual attire. May I join you? He asked. Azumi gestured to the chair opposite hers. Your grandfather is remarkable. He has been the heart of our family, Ryuichi agreed, taking the offered seat. Even in hiding, his influence shaped everything we did. Including your choice to lead the Yakuza side of the family business? Azumi asked directly. Ryuichi's expression revealed surprise at her bluntness, then something like respect. The Hanazawa family's connection to what you call Yakuza is complex. We are not criminals in the sense you imagine. We are protectors of traditions that would otherwise be lost, sometimes operating outside conventional law because the law does not always protect what should be preserved. Art smuggling, Azumi guessed. Recovering cultural treasures looted during wartime, he corrected. Protecting artists who would be exploited. Maintaining traditions that commercial interest would destroy for profit. He looked out at the darkened garden. My father sometimes crossed lines I have tried to redraw. The balance is not always clear. Azumi studied his profile, seeing both the hardness that commanded fear and the sensitivity that appreciated beauty. What did you mean earlier about my choice after the ceremony? Ryuichi turned back to her, his amber eyes reflecting the room's soft lighting. Exactly that. You may return to your previous life with our gratitude and protection. Your financial concerns would be addressed permanently. Or, or you could remain connected to what will happen tomorrow. The alliance being restored will need artists who understand what we preserve. He hesitated, then added more softly, My grandfather has waited decades for someone worthy to continue his teachings directly. And what would you prefer? Azumi asked, watching his face carefully. Something shifted in Ryoichi's expression, a momentary lowering of the careful control he maintained. What began as a commission has become more complex. You have seen parts of my world few ever witness. You've met my grandfather, the heart of everything I protect. He paused. I find I am reluctant to sever that connection. The admission, understated as it was, revealed more than flowery declarations might have. Azumi realized that for a man like Ryoichi, even this much vulnerability represented rare trust. Tomorrow will bring many changes, he continued, rising to his feet. Rest well, Kageyama-san. The ceremony begins at dawn. He moved toward the door, then stopped, turning back. Whatever you choose afterward, know that what you have created has already changed the course of 5 families' histories. That legacy is yours, regardless of your path forward. As the door closed behind him, Azumi touched the metal bracelet at her wrist, the circle connecting student to teacher across generations. Tomorrow would complete one circle, and perhaps begin another. Dawn painted the eastern sky in shades of pearl and rose gold as Azumi followed Miyu through the silent compound. Dressed again in the indigo kimono, her hair arranged formally, she felt transformed, no longer merely a struggling artist, but part of something ancient and significant. The weight of that responsibility settled on her shoulders as they approached the ceremonial building where everything would change. Guards positioned throughout the garden bowed respectfully as they passed. Azumi noticed their increased numbers, the subtle bulges of weapons beneath formal attire, the alert eyes constantly scanning surroundings. The threat from the Ishida family was being taken with utmost seriousness. The guests have arrived, Miyu informed her quietly. They await only you and Hanazawa-san. At the entrance to the ceremonial building, Ryoichi stood in traditional formal kimono, the Hanazawa crest prominent on the silk. The severity of the attire emphasized his natural authority, though Azumi now saw beyond it to the complexity beneath. The man who discussed art with passion and protected his grandfather with fierce devotion. Are you ready? He asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Azumi touched her grandmother's bracelet for courage. Yes. Ryoichi nodded once, then slid open the door. The interior had been transformed overnight. Where yesterday there had been only Takashi seated before the hearth, now 4 cushions were arranged around a central space. 3 were occupied by individuals whose presence commanded attention, even in silence. An elderly woman in a kimono that spoke of understated wealth, her silver hair arranged perfectly, spine straight despite advanced age. A middle-aged man with shrewd eyes and diplomatic bearing, dressed in formal Western attire. A younger woman, perhaps 40, with sharp features and the confident posture of someone accustomed to authority, wearing a modern interpretation of traditional dress. All rose as Ryoichi and Azumi entered. Takashi Himura sat slightly apart beside the alcove where Azumi's tea set gleamed on a lacquered tray. May I present Azumi Kageyama, Ryoichi announced formally, master ceramicist and creator of the pieces that will complete our interrupted tradition. The elderly woman spoke first, her voice strong despite her years. The Nakamura family welcomes you, Kageyama-san. I am Hanako Nakamura, last of the original signatories. The man bowed next. Hiroshi Tanaka, representing the Tanaka family interests. The younger woman nodded respectfully. Keiko Watanabe. My grandfather was present at the original ceremony. Azumi returned each greeting with appropriate formality, acutely aware of being surrounded by some of Japan's most influential family representatives, people whose names appeared in business publications and political discussions. Please be seated, Takashi invited, gesturing to the remaining cushion. The hour approaches for what was left undone to be completed. As Azumi took her place, she noticed an empty 6th cushion positioned slightly apart from the others. Is someone else expected? She whispered to Ryoichi as he knelt beside her. Traditionally, all 5 families should be represented, he replied quietly. The cushion acknowledges the Ishida family's place, even in their betrayal. Takashi cleared his throat, drawing all attention. 38 years ago, we gathered to formalize an alliance that had existed informally for generations. 5 families committed to preserving Japanese artistic traditions through changing times, protecting techniques, supporting masters, ensuring cultural treasures remained in appropriate hands. His amber eyes moved to each person present. That ceremony was interrupted by violence instigated by those who saw our cooperative strength as a threat to their individual power. Hanako Nakamura nodded solemnly. The Ishida family's betrayal cost us dearly. Many treasures lost, alliances fractured, and you, Takashi-san, forced into hiding. What was broken will be mended today, Takashi continued. The tea ceremony will resume where it was interrupted, using pieces created by the hands of my spiritual successor. He gestured toward Azumi with evident pride. The circle closes, and a new generation continues what we began. As Takashi began the formal preparations for the ceremony, Azumi found herself holding her breath. The master's hands, though aged, moved with practiced precision, each gesture carrying decades of meaning. When he lifted the teapot she had created, his touch was reverent. The ritual proceeded with mesmerizing deliberation. Water heated, tea prepared, each cup presented with specific movements to each participant. When Azumi received her cup, she recognized the profound honor of being served by a living legend using pieces her own hands had formed. The connection felt almost mystical, clay and tradition binding them across time. As the final participant, Keiko Watanabe, received her tea, Takashi prepared to speak the traditional words that would complete the ceremony. The explosion shattered the silence. It came from somewhere near the compound's main entrance, far enough away to cause no damage to their building, but close enough for the sound to resonate through the walls. Security alarms activated instantly, and the door slid open to reveal one of Ryuichi's guards, his formal attire contrasting with the modern earpiece he wore. "Sir, we have a breach at the north gate. Multiple intruders." Ryuichi rose smoothly, authority radiating from him. "Secure the ceremony room. No one enters." His gaze swept the assembled dignitaries. "Please continue." This interruption was anticipated. Before leaving, his eyes met Azumi's briefly, a look that contained both reassurance and warning. Then he was gone, sliding the door closed behind him. Takashi's expression remained serene, despite the disruption. "We will proceed," he said firmly. "What was interrupted once will not be interrupted again." Outside, Azumi heard raised voices, running footsteps, and what might have been distant gunfire. The representatives from the 3 families remained outwardly calm, though tension showed in tightened hands around teacups. Takashi raised his voice slightly to be heard over the commotion. "With this ceremony, we renew our commitment to preserve what others would destroy, to protect what others would exploit, to honor what others would forget." He lifted his teacup. "May our alliance endure beyond our individual lives." Each representative drank in turn, completing the ritual despite the chaos unfolding outside. As Azumi raised her own cup, she felt the weight of history merging with present danger. The ceremony that had cost Takashi decades in hiding, now threatened by the same forces. A crash directly outside the building made everyone flinch. Voices shouted, a scuffle ensued, then silence fell abruptly. The door trembled as someone attempted to open it against the guard's resistance. Hinako Nakamura set down her cup with deliberate calm. It seems the Ishida family objects to their exclusion. The door finally slid open with force. 3 men burst in, 2 clearly security personnel in disheveled suits, flanking an older man in expensive traditional attire. Behind them, Ryuichi appeared, a thin line of blood trailing from his temple, his formal kimono torn at the shoulder. "Forgive the intrusion," the central man said, his voice smooth despite the violence of his entrance. "I believe my family's place remains at this table." Takashi Himura looked up, his aged face showing no surprise. "Kazuo Ishida, you arrive uninvited, as your father did 38 years ago. And yet the ceremony cannot truly be complete without the 5th family," Kazuo replied, his gaze sweeping the room until it landed on Azumi and the tea set beside her. Something like hunger flashed in his eyes. So the rumors were true. Takashi Himura lives, and his work is reborn. Ryuichi stepped forward, positioning himself between Kazuo and the others. "Your men attacked my security forces. 2 of my people are injured. Regrettable miscommunication, Kazuo said with a dismissive wave. Your guard seemed unwilling to accept my invitation credentials. His attention returned to Azumi. And this must be the artist whose work has caused such commotion in certain circles. Your reputation has grown quickly, Kageyama-san. Before Azumi could respond, Ryuichi spoke. State your purpose, Ishida-san. You've interrupted a private ceremony. My purpose is participation, Kazuo said simply. The Ishida family has as much right to this alliance as any other. Hanako Nakamura made a sound of disbelief. Your father betrayed us to government officials who would have criminalized our protection of cultural artifacts. Your family provided the explosives that destroyed the museum where our ceremony took place. Ancient history, Kazuo said smoothly. My father had his methods. I have mine. Times change, but alliances, true alliances, should endure. He gestured to the empty cushion. That place was set for a reason. Tension thickened the air as the representatives exchanged glances. Takashi remained still, his expression unreadable. Let him sit, Azumi said suddenly. All eyes turned to her in surprise. Ryuichi's face darkened with concern. The cushion acknowledges the Ishida family's place, Azumi continued, meeting Kazuo's calculating gaze directly. Empty or filled, that history exists. Let him be part of what happens here. Takashi studied his protege for a long moment, then nodded slowly. As the creator of the pieces that complete our circle, Kageyama-san has the right to extend inclusion. He turned to Kazuo. You may observe the completion of our ceremony, but participation requires unanimous consent from all original families. Kazuo smiled thinly, but took the offered place, his security personnel remaining standing behind him. With deliberate movements, Takashi prepared a final cup of tea using Azumi's teapot. When he placed it before Kazuo, the significance was lost on no one, an offering of peace that acknowledged history without erasing it. The ceremony concludes as it should have decades ago, Takashi announced. 5 families, 1 purpose, preservation of what must not be lost. He nodded to Ryuichi. My grandson will speak the words of commitment for the Hanazawa family. Ryuichi knelt formally beside his grandfather, his bearing regal despite his disheveled appearance. The Hanazawa family commits to the protection of artistic legacy, to the support of master craftspeople, and to the preservation of techniques and traditions that define our cultural heritage. What my grandfather began, I continue. Each representative spoke similar words in turn, the formal phrases carrying the weight of both history and future commitment. When Kazuo's turn came, he smiled slightly before speaking. The Ishida family acknowledges past divergence and seeks future convergence. What was broken can be mended, like fine ceramic repaired with gold. His eyes flicked to the tea set. Sometimes the repair becomes more valuable than the original perfection. When the final words had been spoken, Takashi produced a document from within his robes, elegant calligraphy on traditional paper. This covenant replaces what was destroyed in the fire. Each family will affix their seal, binding us to purpose rather than merely profit. One by one, each representative pressed their family seal into red ink and marked the document. When it came to Kazuo's turn, tension rose again. Would the Ishida family truly rejoin the alliance, or was this an elaborate deception? Kazuo removed a seal from within his kimono, examining it in the light. My father's seal was destroyed in the same fire that supposedly claimed Takashi Himura. I had a new one created, symbolizing both continuation and change. He pressed it to the paper with deliberate care. When Azumi's turn came, she hesitated. I have no family seal. Takashi reached for her hand, the one bearing her grandmother's bracelet. This was Michiko's mark as my student. It carries the legitimacy of lineage. Understanding dawned as Azumi removed the metal bracelet for the first time in years. The inner band contained a small ceramic piece with an engraved design, her grandmother's artistic signature connected to Takashi's tradition. When she pressed it into the red ink and then to paper, completing the circle of signatories, something shifted in the atmosphere of the room, as if scattered fragments had finally reassembled into a whole. It is done, Takashi said, satisfaction evident in his voice. He carefully folded the document and handed it to Ryuichi for safekeeping. What was interrupted is now complete. As the formal ceremony concluded, The representatives rose, moving to speak in smaller groups. Kazuo approached Azumi directly, his security maintaining a respectful distance. "Your work is exceptional," he said, gesturing to the tea set. Few could have captured Takashi's essence while adding their own voice. "Thank you," Azumi replied cautiously. "The Ishida family has extensive connections in the art world," Kazuo continued. "Your career could benefit significantly from proper patronage." "She has patronage," Ryuichi interrupted, appearing at Azumi's side. The cut at his temple had stopped bleeding but remained untreated, a reminder of the violence that had preceded this momentary peace. Kazuo smiled thinly. "Of course, the Hanazawa family has first claim, having discovered her talent." He bowed slightly to them both. "But talent deserves broader appreciation. Consider my offer an extension of our renewed alliance." As he moved away to speak with Hanako Nakamura, Ryuichi's posture remained tense. "Do you trust him?" Azumi asked quietly. "About as much as I trust a snake not to strike when cornered," Ryuichi replied. "The Ishida family doesn't seek reconciliation without purpose." "Then why allow him to participate?" Ryuichi's amber eyes met hers. "Because you were right. Excluding him would perpetuate the division. Including him binds him to witnesses and documentation." He glanced toward where Kazuo stood in conversation. "Better to have the snake where we can see it." The gathering continued for another hour before the representatives began departing with formal farewells. Security remained heightened throughout the compound, Ryuichi's men escorting each guest to their vehicles with vigilant attention. When only the Hanazawa family remained, Takashi sank onto a cushion, exhaustion finally showing on his aged features. "After all these years," he murmured, "complete at last." Ryuichi knelt beside his grandfather, concern evident. "You should rest, grandfather. Today has been demanding." "I have rested enough these past decades," Takashi replied with a weak smile. "Today, I lived again." He turned to Azumi, extending a hand to her. "Come, child. There is one more matter before this day ends." Azumi joined them, kneeling beside the master potter, whose work had influenced her entire artistic life. "You have completed what was interrupted," Takashi said. "The tea set, the ceremony, the covenant, a circle closed after nearly 4 decades. He reached for the teapot she had created, holding it with reverent hands. "This is masterwork, bearing both my influence and your distinct spirit. It deserves proper acknowledgement." From within his robes, Takashi produced a small wooden box, aged and polished by years of handling. "This contains my personal chop, my artistic signature used on only my finest pieces. I have not marked a piece since the museum fire." Ryuichi drew a sharp breath, understanding the significance before Azumi fully grasped it. "Grandfather," he said softly, "are you certain?" Takashi nodded firmly. "More certain than I have been of anything in years." He opened the box, revealing an exquisitely carved stone seal. "Azumi Kageyama, I recognize you formally as my artistic successor. This chop is now yours, to mark works that continue our shared tradition." The honor was so overwhelming that Azumi found herself speechless. In the ceramic world, such recognition from a master like Takashi Himura was beyond price, a lineage connection that validated everything she had ever created. "I cannot accept something so precious," she finally managed. "You already have," Takashi replied gently. "When you recreated what was destroyed, when you completed what was interrupted, when you sealed the covenant with your grandmother's mark, this is merely formal acknowledgement of what your hands have already proven." With trembling fingers, Azumi accepted the wooden box. "I will honor your trust." "I know you will." Takashi turned to Ryuichi. "Now, grandson, I believe there are matters you wish to discuss with Kageyama-san privately. An old man requires rest after such excitement." As Ryuichi helped his grandfather to his feet, Takashi added quietly, "Remember what I told you about opportunities rarely presenting themselves twice." Left alone in the ceremonial room, Azumi carefully gathered her tea set, each piece representing not just her skill, but her unexpected connection to history and tradition. The weight of Takashi's seal box in her sleeve reminded her how completely her life had transformed in the days since a rainy night and a scratched car. Ryuichi returned as she was wrapping the final piece. He had changed from his torn ceremonial attire into Simpler clothes, though no less elegant. The cut at his temple had been cleaned, but remained visible. "Are you injured?" Azumi asked, nodding toward the wound. "Nothing significant," he replied, touching it absently. Ishida's men were more interested in access than combat. Once they realized we wouldn't be deterred, the confrontation became largely symbolic. "Do you believe his participation was genuine?" Ryoichi considered the question carefully. "Genuine in the moment, perhaps. The Ishida family has always understood the value of being inside rather than outside circles of power. Whether that translates to genuine commitment remains to be seen." He moved to the alcove, where a calligraphy scroll hung, the same mountains enshrouded in mist that had decorated the space during their tea ceremony days earlier. "When I was a child," Ryoichi said, his voice softer than usual, "my grandfather taught me that certain views of mountains are superior to others. Not because of the mountain itself, but because of where one stands to observe it." He turned to face her. "Perspective changes everything." Azumi understood he wasn't speaking merely of landscapes. "And what perspective do you hold now? 1 week ago, you were a stranger who damaged my car. Today you are integral to my family's legacy and future." His amber eyes held hers steadily. "Perspective indeed changes everything." "You promised me a choice," Azumi reminded him, after the ceremony was complete. "And you have it still," Ryoichi confirmed. "You may return to your previous life with our lasting protection and support. My family honors its debts, and what you have done for us exceeds any calculation of value. Or you remain connected to what began today, not as guest or temporary collaborator, but as recognized inheritor of my grandfather's artistic legacy." Ryoichi hesitated before continuing. "The alliance renewed today will establish a foundation to support traditional arts throughout Japan. It will need leadership from those who understand both artistic integrity and practical realities." "You're offering me a position? I'm offering you a partnership," he corrected. "Your artistic vision combined with the resources of 5 traditional families could transform how Japanese ceramic arts are preserved and promoted." Azumi touched the wooden box containing Takashi's seal. "And where would I live? Work?" "Wherever you chose," Ryoichi answered, "though I admit I would prefer if that choice included remaining close enough for my grandfather to provide the direct mentorship he has awaited decades to give." Something in his tone suggested more than professional consideration, though his expression remained carefully neutral. "And what about you, Ryoichi-san? What do you want beyond your family obligations?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. For a moment, the carefully controlled Yakuza boss vanished, replaced by a man facing an unexpected crossroads. "What began as strategy has become something I did not anticipate," he admitted quietly. "I brought you here for your hands, for what they could create. I did not expect to find myself equally interested in the mind and spirit guiding those hands." The admission, understated as it was, revealed more than flowery declarations might have. Azumi recognized the significance of such vulnerability from a man whose position demanded constant strength. "When I scratched your car that night, I thought my life was ending," Azumi said, moving closer to him. "Instead, it was beginning a transformation I never imagined." She reached up, her fingers gently touching the cut at his temple, the wound he had received protecting the ceremony, protecting her work. He remained perfectly still under her touch, only his eyes revealing the impact of the simple contact. "I accept your offer," she said simply, "both the partnership and whatever may grow alongside it." Relief and something warmer flickered across Ryoichi's features. He took her hand, turning it over to reveal the faint clay traces still embedded in her skin, despite formal preparations for the ceremony. "These hands," he said softly, "have changed more than pottery. They have changed legacies." 1 year later, light streamed through the tall windows of Gallery Hanazawa in Tokyo's Ginza district. The space had been transformed from a traditional art gallery into something unique, part exhibition space, part working studio, part cultural center. At its heart stood the ceremonial tea set that had reunited 5 families, displayed in a case of honor with documentation of its historical significance. Azumi moved through the crowded opening, greeting collectors and artists with the confidence of someone who had found her true place. The gallery represented her vision brought to life with Hanazawa resources, a space where traditional ceramic arts received the reverence they deserved, while remaining accessible to new generations. In the year since the ceremonial renewal, her life had transformed completely. Takashi Himura had emerged from seclusion, acknowledged publicly as having survived the historical fire, his return to the art world creating international sensation. Their master-apprentice relationship had been formalized, Azumi spending 3 days each week studying directly under his guidance. The Alliance of Five Families had established a foundation supporting traditional arts throughout Japan, with Azumi serving as artistic director alongside representatives from each family. Even Kazuo Ishida had maintained his commitment, though Ryuichi still watched him with careful attention. Quite a triumph, a familiar voice observed beside her. Ryuichi had appeared silently, as was his habit, impeccably dressed, but allowing himself to be seen publicly at her side, a significant statement in itself. The exhibition or the journey that led to it? Azumi asked, smiling. Both. His amber eyes surveyed the gallery with evident satisfaction. My grandfather is holding court in the East Room. 3 museum directors are competing for his attention. He deserves the recognition, Azumi said, decades overdue. They moved together through the exhibition, past display cases showing the evolution of Japanese ceramic traditions. The final installation stopped visitors consistently, a sleek black panel displaying a ceramic reproduction of the scratch that had marked Ryuichi's car, transformed into an elegant ceramic inlay filled with golds using kintsugi technique. Beside this hung a ceramic sculpture Azumi had created specially for the opening, 2 hands reaching toward each other, one leaving a golden mark upon the other. Some visitors have asked if this piece is for sale, Ryuichi commented, nodding toward the sculpture. And what did you tell them? That some marks are meant to be kept, not sold, he replied, his fingers brushing against hers briefly. A public restraint that balanced their private connection. Azumi touched the dragon pendant at her throat, a gift from Ryuichi when the gallery opening had been confirmed. Its twin resided in the dragon tattoo now completed across his back, their connection symbolized in matching marks neither visible to casual observers. From a scratched car to all of this, she mused, looking around at the gallery, at the legacy now preserved, at the future unfolding before them. Who could have imagined? Ryuichi's eyes held hers with the intensity that had never diminished. I did, he said simply, the moment you revealed what you were protecting more carefully than your own safety. As the exhibition continued around them, Azumi reflected on how completely one moment of seeming misfortune had transformed everything. The chance encounter that had revealed her artistic heritage, reconnected a master with his legacy, restored an ancient alliance, and brought her into a world where tradition and innovation flowed together like glaze over clay. What had begun with a scratch had become an indelible mark connecting past to future, damage transformed into something more valuable than original perfection.